Thank you. Thank you. You can call me ESPO. In 1987, I was 19 years old. I was fresh out of high school. And I was just getting out of high school at 19 because I got left back at least once. My mom held me back. She didn't think I was ready. She was right. I wanted to make up for lost time, so I went to one of those art schools that they advertise on TV that say, you can have your degree in 18 months. So I went, and I thought my talent would really get me through it, but I flunked right out. So flunking out of art school right off the bat was a really terrible feeling, and I was miserable. I didn't know where I was going to go. So I thought it was the school. Maybe the school was I wasn't ready to blame myself yet. I blamed the school. But I went looking for a little bit of guidance. So there was a woman named Jane Golden that was painting murals in Philadelphia. And at the time, she was the only person I knew or knew of that was a working professional artist that was making money off of making art. So I went to talk to her. And she knew the work that I had done, she'd seen it, and she thought that I was a perfect candidate for working with the Mural Arts program. At the time, they were making murals, but they were a division of an anti-graffiti network. Philadelphia had the first government program dedicated to eradicating graffiti in the world. And they had a two-pronged approach. One was to, chase graffiti writers. And the other approach was to paint murals or try to get graffiti writers to paint murals. So I was a prime candidate for that, but I went to talk to Jane about it. I was seriously tempted, considering it. But she told me that I'd have to submit sketches and I'd have to, compromise and talk to people. And that all sounded terrible. So I said, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So that night, I painted this, and this is as far as you can see, this is street art. This is all the hallmarks. First of all, I'm using Mona Lisa. I'm using the celebrity of Mona Lisa to light up my artwork here. And, the red paint was a standard shade of paint that the Anti-Graffiti Network used to cover over graffiti. They thought it had the best coverage, and it did the best to discourage people from putting graffiti on top of it. It didn't work. It just made all the walls look terrible. So, and then in case that was too subtle, I put this headline that said, "This is the network." And I put this long dedication next to it that says, "Life is short, art is long, true art will stand the test of time, and I don't consider the network to be a worthy judge." So, and in case I didn't make the point, I was painting this over top of graffiti, which is something that street artists do all the time. So I was projecting the very crime the network was guilty of, and I was doing it at the same time. But it was doing a lot of things for me, and it was making a point to the one-person audience that I had. And I took pictures the next day, waited for them to be developed, as we did in those times. And then I showed Jane the pictures, and she said, "Yeah, you can't work over here. Just stay out in the street and do what you're doing. That's enough." But the late 80s, early 90s was no place to be running around the streets of Philadelphia. It wasn't time for that. It was, too precarious. So I thought about going back to school, and I heard about the University of the Arts, which they said they had open portfolio days that I could show up with a folder with a brown paper bag, and I could show my artwork. And that's what I did. And the admissions officer saw this very wall, and she said, "Oh, I pass by that every day. You're in. Class of '95, welcome to it." So what happened then was I flunked out of that school too. But at least, I remember being face down in my bed, just really depressed that I was failing again. And they gave me a call. They gave me a real bit of grace. I got a call from the dean's office that said, you're totally failed out of the school, but if you want to come in and make a case for yourself, we'll hear you out. So I went in. I was late, of course, so there were 16 people ahead of me. I watched them all go in. I watched each one getting kicked out, like leaving in tears or leaving just totally destroyed. They're, devastated. And I was number 17. So I went into this room that was a big conference room, long table, people all around it. I think I knew one person because I really didn't go to school much. And there was all the department heads from the school and the dean. And they said, I said, look, I want to tell you I'm going to tell you why I'm here. I was like, as I look all my life, I see a hillside that's all burnt bridges, burnt every one. I was like, the one I'm standing on is on fire and it's burning, but I would like to put it out, and I'd like to make this one right. And there was like 10 people just stone silent, like not even looking at me, just looking at the table. But the 11th person, the dean, was smiling like, okay, we'll give you a shot. So they let me back into school. They gave me 6 weeks to make up the work, and I did it. I finally achieved a bit of discipline and a bit of determination to actually finish something for the first time ever. I had another great sophomore year at the University of the Arts, and then I left. I felt like I'd done it. Once I knew that I could, first of all, it's a really expensive proposition. And second of all, I really just wanted to know that I could do work I didn't want to do. I could really just stare down whatever assignment was being handed to me and handle it. So, onward. But you know what I did? Went right back to where I started. And what I did here was, I like the idea of making statements. I like the idea of making grandiose, declarations of existence. But I also wanted to tell a story. And there's a story I'm telling here. This is a biographical sketch of where I was at the time. It says ESPO, presumably, lowercase e, S-P-O. The E is envisioning. The S is spraying. The P is paranoid or perhaps spotted by police. And the O is out of there. The O is saying, oh no, and he's gone. And next to it, it says inner city organic. I didn't want to sign my name. I wanted the people to figure it out themselves. And my neighborhood crew was called Inner City Youth, and we were, barely. But what I was interested in at the time was the organic idea of we're flesh and blood people in this hostile concrete environment. I like the idea of weeds coming through the sidewalk cracks, things like that. I really loved when trees grow through fences, when nature overcomes all this crazy infrastructure that's built around. But the real thing I'm trying to tell you is I should have trademarked organic. That was I had a moment there. That would have been something. I probably would have spent the rest of my life trying to fight to hold on to organic, but, this is, 1992, so whatever. Life goes on. I was there. So I wanted to be really, to me it wasn't a matter of trying to be a good artist. I wanted to be a very effective graffiti writer. And the entire history of graffiti is signatures. And it's really logo types. It's really like creating logos. It's creating identities. It's creating a brand for yourself. And here's a couple different depictions of that. The name is based on an elaborate signature. It's just a dimension added to it. It's now taken on a Rick Griffin kind of scope to it. And then on the far right side that we'll see more of, we call that a tall print. It's a really interesting invention where it stands as high as the artist that's drawing it. And it's a really good, effective stand-in for a person. It's a cutout almost. I also make a little joke on the shoulder of the guy walking away from us that says name brand. Even at this time, this is like late 90s, which was a great time to be out in the streets and painting. I was really interested in branding. I was really interested in the idea of corporations were doing a really good job of taking whatever they could from graffiti and putting it into their brands. But I thought graffiti writers could do a better job of branding themselves and being a little more cognizant of what they were creating and having it really do a better job of representing who they are. And as much as it sounds like I've got commercial aspirations of sales, it's not. It's really just, I love the fact that graffiti was free, that it was something that you could see between home and work, that you could just enjoy any day of the week. It didn't cost anything. But I also, I had room in my life to try and figure out a way to be useful to people. I thought, style's great, telling a story is great, but I wanted to make use, and I wanted to help people. John Coltrane's house, this is a house that he lived in the first, I think he lived there 10 or 12 years after he got out of the Army. He wrote his first couple records here. I think he wrote Giant Steps here. It was kind of his home base for launching off, and it was before he moved to New York and moved to Long Island. His cousin Mary still lived in this building. They had just like a kind of chicken scratch mural on this building. So I stepped up, I offered my services, I got to meet cousin Mary. Coltrane wrote a song about her, it's wonderful. And she said, sure, you can paint it. And the first version I painted of this, she hated it. I thought the door came out pretty good, but I thought the hands were too big. The portrait I painted on the bay window, she hated. She painted over. Like the next day, it was crushing. I came back to finish it and was gone. And when I looked at it, she popped her head out of the door and said, oh, it was terrible. That didn't look like him. She said, but I like what you did on the door. You got his hands right. His hands are big. He got his hands nice and big, the way they were. So I took the medicine and I went home. And a couple of months, 8 months later, I came back and I snuck up on it. And I repainted what you see here. And she stuck her head out. She's like, oh, that's nice. Look at that guy. Oh, I was so psyched. I gave Mary I gave her a chalk drawing that I made of Coltrane. She said, come here, I want to show you something. She takes me in the house, takes me into the basement. She's got a 5-foot pile of mail and artwork people have sent from all over the world. This thing was like a haystack of drawings. She takes my drawing, she throws it right on top. She said, it's no offense, I'm just overwhelmed. It's just a lot of it. But she says, here's the real prize I'm going to show you. She takes me across the room and she shows me this beautiful upright piano. Piano's nothing special. But on the left side of the piano was a scallop, like a half pipe from cigarette burns. John Coltrane would sit at the bench, he would get a cord, and he would sit sideways, and he would let a cigarette just burn on the side of the piano. And he did that long enough to destroy this piano. And for years I thought the piano had been disappeared or it got lost, but some collector bought it in the mid-90s and it's in good hands somewhere. We may never see it again, but at least somebody's taking care of it. But, growing out of that, growing past that, I kind of toggled between making stupid jokes and making graffiti that said something about myself. I liked humor. Humor's okay. I still liked advertising. I grew up in the 80s. Advertising's everything to me. I was a kid that just like a lot of kids glued to the TV. It was golden era for broadcasting messages. And it was everything I wanted. Everything I wanted was on the TV set. I was a very basic kid. So when it was time to make work of my own, I wasn't above making work that looked like advertising. I thought it was really fun, and I liked the idea of, corporations were taking from graffiti. It was fun to take stuff back. And then at some point in 1996, I'd been living in New York for a few years. And, we had a mayor, I forget his name, weird dude with the comb over. He was really making a drive to just lock up quality of life offenders, and they had a huge focus. They had a really laser focus on graffiti. So it looked like in 1996, like the game was over. Like whatever life graffiti had on the streets of New York, it was no longer happening. But I was also about 28 years old, and I was really interested in making work that made sense as a 28-year-old. So I made a $10 bet that I could paint large block letters on the streets of New York. And 10 days after I made the bet, on January 4th, I painted this. And this is what used to be, you know it now, it's the Pret at 12th and Broadway. But at the time, it was like the former Forbidden Planet. And, you know, the city's youth knew it as the former Forbidden Planet. So it was neat to tap into that kind of energy, to tap into that kind of location and that kind of power. And this was really simple. This was just me painting a gate silver, using the tools that people use to paint gates, which was a 4-inch silver brush, or 4-inch brush with silver paint. And then at the last minute, maybe the last 20 minutes, I would add a few lines to make it say ESPO. It was graphic, it was direct. I felt good about doing it. And it was one of those things where I didn't think there was a way to like feel bad about this. I honestly didn't think I was doing anything wrong. You know, when the police eventually caught up to me, they didn't think there was anything wrong with this. They didn't want to prosecute me for this. Victory. And, you know, the guy that I bet $10, he didn't believe I did it. He thought it was a scam. And, you know, it kind of was. If like doing actual hard work is a scam, I guess it's a scam. But so I had to prove it to him, I had to keep doing it. I ended up doing it over and over and over again. Until it was like, finally he filmed me painting it in his neighborhood. And he did the thing where he was like filming the cops as they drove by to try and get their attention as to what he was filming, but it didn't work. They could care less. He still hasn't paid me the $10. I painted this on Lafayette Street. This one I feel bad about because it was a really cool old sign that I kind of repainted and rewired to like advertise my book. And I really felt bad because they, you know, the billboard company put another billboard in front of it because they realized it was revenue that they weren't getting. So they blocked it with another billboard. So I'm sorry about that. So moving on from that, like as a 30-year-old, and you know, I locked into this thing that was kind of altruistic, kind of a way of like navigating the city, kind of in and out of criminality. But I took the show on the road. I have a good friend of mine that grew up in Los Angeles. He did 5 years of state prison in Los Angeles, in California, for painting graffiti, just strictly for painting graffiti. After he got out of jail, we went back to Los Angeles, and I went to City Hall and asked them, what do I need to do to paint over graffiti? Do I need permission? How does it work? They said, you don't need to ask anybody for permission to paint over graffiti. If you see graffiti, you're allowed to paint over it. And here's a t-shirt. They gave me a t-shirt that had like a city logo on the front and it had like an anti-graffiti. I said, that's great, can I have another one? So I got 2 t-shirts. And I went painting over graffiti with a person that had a felony conviction for painting over graffiti. He knew every neighborhood. He drove. He was, you know, we started out at like Watts and Compton, and then eventually West Hollywood. Like, of course, like West Hollywood and Laurel Canyon, it was really, people were screaming at us, like, what are you doing? But really everywhere, nobody had a problem with what we were doing. The only people that had a problem with what we were doing, I should tell you what we were doing. So we were painting over graffiti, but now you can see here, you see this like block of paint that doesn't match the rest of the building. That's how they did it. Like, so I kind of took that to the next logical step. And I painted these blocks that said ESPO, and I took a before and after picture and everything. Come on in, plenty of seats. Welcome. Happy birthday. So yeah, I painted these blobs that said ESPO. We had before and after pictures, and we went all over the city doing it. We did 50 or 60 of them in a month's time. And then I got home and went straight to Coney Island. Like, I'd spent 15, I don't know, longer years painting one word. I got pretty good at it. Had a lot of fun doing it. Then it was time to cross. For me, I had enough of ESPO. I crossed the street, and I said, all right, I've had enough of the one word. Now I'm going to learn all the other words. So I went across the street, and I started painting signs in Coney Island. I taught myself how to paint signs. There was nobody to teach me at the time. Like, it's kind of amazing to think in 1999 or 2000, like nobody was interested in sign painting. I had it to myself. So I did what I could free of charge for the businesses in Coney Island. And the first place I painted was this place, the El Dorado bumper cars. First of all, the El Dorado bumper cars has the only Richard Long sound system in existence. Richard Long did the sound systems for Studio 54, Paradise Garage, who knows how many other places, but they're all gone. The last one left is in the El Dorado. So go down there and bump your ass off. And it opened up this whole other world of, again, the through line in all this is graphic, it's communication, it's personality, it's narrative storytelling, it's service. All the things that I started out with are still in play. And from there, when I was painting in Philadelphia, when I was a kid, I'm West Philadelphia, born and raised. On a playground I spent most of my days. And this is 60th Street. This is on Market Street. And these rooftops, it was the perfect architecture. The architecture was perfect that there was mostly two-story buildings, but at the end of every block was a three-story building that allowed you a perfect 60-foot by 12-foot or so surface to paint. And there's probably about, 60 or 70 of these locations in West Philadelphia. So you could really sit on the train, and you had artwork happening on both sides. It was really great. And then about 1999, whenever the Democratic Convention was in Philadelphia, they painted over everything. They got a huge grant to eliminate all the graffiti in Philadelphia. And the guy that was working for anti-graffiti at the time, he figured out that if he had to get on a ladder and he had to climb above the ground, he could charge time and a half or double time for painting over graffiti. So the first thing he did was he painted all these rooftops and he kept them clean for 20 years until I showed up. And with the Jane Golden, who I mentioned at the top, we put together this project. I created a love letter to Philadelphia. It was really a love letter to my neighborhood. It was a love letter to graffiti. It was a love letter to the city of Philadelphia. It was a love letter to these rooftops, these like magic spaces. These roofs were painted with color like since the 60s. Nobody ever complained about it. It was this like really safe place where the stuff that was on the ground might have gotten complained about, but the stuff that was on top, it was like a free space. So we went and we painted all these spots, as many as we could, and we got that energy back up there. And there was another component to the story where I had a friend of mine who was going to jail, and it was a really terrible situation. He was going to be gone for 7 years. He really wanted to keep a relationship going with his daughter and his girlfriend, his baby mama. So this is a story about that too. It's about two people trying to connect, trying to keep a connection going. And it worked. He's home and he's a really great father, and the whole situation worked out perfectly. But we planted the seeds here. It was just, You know, we took a year, we painted 50 walls. This was the first one, I think, we painted. We painted this the day that Michael Jackson died. And one of the things, you know, when Jane first told me that I'd have to submit sketches, I was still not submitting sketches. We had this grant, we had a huge grant from the Pew Foundation. I didn't want to submit sketches for this project. I was still like the really defiant 19-year-old, and I didn't want to do it. But I had a few ideas that I wanted to do, and what I said was, I can't tell you what I'm going to paint. I have to like go and talk to people, and they'll tell me what to paint. And she accepted that. She was very reluctant, but she accepted that. But this was a really good example of that. Like, at the time, I was a brand new father, and these are refrigerator magnets that, when you become a father, they give you these magnets. But this was the day that Michael Jackson passed, and we had just painted the wall white, and people were yelling at us like, "Are you going to put something about Michael Jackson up there? You should paint the glove," which would have been great. But what we did instead was we actually painted his name. If you look to the left at the top of the roof line, that M that's sideways, that's M-I-C. If you're going down diagonally to the left, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, green J, A-C-K, S-O-N. Perfect. In real time. So we were able to tell people, like, his name is up there. And it became like the secret in the neighborhood that people would tell each other. So this opened up a whole new style of interacting with people and talking to people. When we painted this, we thought we'd really gone too far. We really, you know, somebody went to work in the morning and they came home and saw this. And they were really cool about it. They were like, "Oh, okay, that's something." They just went in the house. They were like... So after, you know, painting 50 walls in Philadelphia, it opened up the world. We had calls come in from 14 different cities over the next 5 years. This is South Africa. Everything in this picture is hand-painted. It's amazing. The computer technology has not reached Johannesburg yet. So first thing we did was paint Mama for Mama Africa. And, you know, we had, I don't know, 2.5 days to paint this, and no problem. Paint dried really fast, easy. And then we painted that. You know, what a place. Really, they were trying to gentrify this. It didn't work out. But we did our best. Meanwhile, back in Brooklyn, this is the site of the former Macy's parking garage. We opened up a studio in downtown Brooklyn to facilitate painting this, and we kept it open for, you know, another 10 years after this. But this was great. This was 80 feet in the air. Nobody else wanted. I had to paint it because nobody else would. Super dangerous, but hey, I'm still here. Yay, yay.
What was it, scissor lift?
It was a scissor lift, yeah, 80-footer. And this is the other mural projects we did. You know, in Philadelphia, we talked to thousands of people. In Brooklyn, we talked to one person, Dave Villarante of Fort Greene. And Dave just told us his whole life story and what he loved about downtown Brooklyn was you could take any train to get home. He could take any train to his neighborhood and he'd be home. That was like the best draw for him. So we made it that. It says, take any train, meet me downtown for a few. I forget where it goes from there. But it was great. Oh, commercial break. So as I'm developing, you know, the lettering, I'm also, at one point when I was a youth, well, not even, in 2002 I did this. Sitting in a bar, sounds of drawing, sounds of drawing. This is the lighthouse. I love how crappy this is, but it gets the point across. So this is a lighthouse. It says you, and there's the word me in the water. And, you know, this is my life. I'm in the water. And the light is shining on me. And I drew this on a napkin, and I thought, like, okay, this is good. Now I need about 1,000 more of these to, like, really depict the ins and outs of my life. And it's just a really simple, you know, in 2002, there were emojis, but it was strictly a Japanese thing on Japanese phones. It was like one phone company had it, nobody else did. And, you know, the American phone system was lagging far behind what was going on in Japan at the time. But I saw emojis, and I thought, like, that's something. You know, maybe I shouldn't do that because it's already happening, but I thought I could make it deeper and stranger, and I could really use that kind of simple graphic communication to, like, explain life, or to try and, like, explain my life better. So I got the opportunity to make these see-through sneakers for Nike, and I covered the shoe, you know, insoles and outsoles and the back and the tongue with these different icons. And I think the one that really kind of brings it home is there's an icon on the bottom that's a hand holding money connected to another hand that's throwing money away. And the arm that connects the two says payday. So kids stood in line, youth stood in line, adults stood in line to buy these shoes, 10, 12 hours, whatever. And they'd get home and they'd unpack these shoes and they'd see all this artwork that was about the experience that they had just gone through, about the ridiculous ins and outs of shopping and buying, about wanting stuff and needing stuff, and, you know, commercial art. It's possible. It can be done. It's probably the only time I did it really well. At the same time, you know, in developing these icons, like, I took it back home and I really thought about, like, the original way of painting is just black spray paint, really simple and direct. Like, I wanted to figure out ways of painting as simply and as directly as possible. And in the course of painting, like, I would do the big colorful stuff, but I'd also be interested in doing these, like, really stark black and white, black spray paint on wall, you know, murals. And enormously fun, really cut to the heart of who I was as an artist, as a graffiti writer, as just a kid in the street. And, oh, there I am, down by the wall, probably painting, maybe not using the bathroom. But this was, for me also, growing up in Philly, this is what I was surrounded by. You know, it was black spray paint everywhere. And it was really liberating to come back and be able to do this as a full grown-up, darn near 50-year-old. Paul Robeson only ran on the field. That's a fact. Oh, the Pete Rose is pretty devastating too. Pete Rose, the rose crying, leaves are falling off, crossing home plate. Sad. Money falling off of him. Rest in peace, Jack Rose. Richie Ashburn. That Harry Callis turned out whack. I'm sorry about that. Arctic Splash. Have you ever had Arctic Splash? You're not missing much. Oh, way up top is Dr. J in some slides with some black socks. He pulled it off. Nobody else could do that, but Dr. J made that work. Icon.
What year was that?
2010? No, I'm sorry, 2017. That's a sign painting combined with stacked up signage. All these paintings ended up back in my studio, and they had sand in every. The I Am a Story. We're hoping to sell that to SF MoMA. We're on hold. Hopefully they'll come back to it. But we took it apart and there was sand like throughout it. So I think it adds something to it. I think once these things got covered in sand, they really became finished. I think everything is shit except you, love. You know, there'll be a picture that'll come up of like, we've had classrooms of kids come into our shop. We'll explain that a little later, and that's guaranteed to get every fourth grader like screaming it. This is Besançon, France. Really beautiful small town, southwest of France. And this was me painting every French or English phrase that, you know, French phrases that we use in everyday English and English phrases that they use in France. And it was super fun. But what's really good about this that I should point out is they keep painting this. The graffiti, we left the graffiti at the bottom, of course, but it keeps growing. Like now, the graffiti is about 2/3 of the way up the wall. It still looks super cool. But there's all types of really great stuff that's happening to that wall on a regular basis. Like for me, I'll paint outside, I'll paint anywhere, and it's just a part of the conversation. Like, you know, every wall I paint gets painted over, or it gets added to, or it changes, and that's just part of the business. This is in Baltimore. Baltimore was a really tough city for us to paint. Like there was a lot going on in Baltimore. They were really suspicious of what we were talking about, but we had a real breakthrough. You know, when people saw how willing we were to paint what we were given, it opened up a lot of doors for us. Like this was a community leader that he said these very words to us, and we painted them, and it opened up like 2 or 3 other spots for us. They wanted us to paint the "I am here because it's home." And they were tearing down this entire block to build a park. And, you know, there was more and more layers. The more we talked to people, the more layers that we realized, like, everything had so many different layers to it that we couldn't even possibly fathom, you know, in a 2-week period that we were painting down there. But we were there to paint "I am here because it's home." There was a guy in the neighborhood named Big Chris who, 25 years ago, gunfire erupted on his block. He called the police. They said, "You should just move. We're not coming over there. Why are you there?" And he said, "I'm here because it's home." Like, what are you talking about? And he stood his ground, and he stayed there, and he's there to this minute. This showed up in the HBO, in an HBO TV series. HBO paid him. They didn't pay us. We said, "Send the check to Mr. Chris." They said, "No, we'll send the money to you. You send the check to Mr. Chris." So, fine. But once we had permission for the one wall, I said, "Well, what about the other 36 buildings?" They said, "If you want to paint the other 36 buildings, it's fine with us. We're only giving you $500, so you do what you want." So we painted the other 36 buildings, and Forever Together worked. You know, sometimes we choose the words because they fit the space, you know, so we chose those words. We get about halfway done, and a woman who lived on the block drove up on us, and she started screaming at us. She was super upset that we were painting these walls, we were painting these buildings, because she led the initiative to tear these buildings down. And in the 2 weeks of us talking to people and talking to the community, nobody said, "Hey, you need to talk to this lady who's like in charge of this entire project." She was furious. She worked with an organization called Hattie Hatterson that was, you know, represented 60 or 70 years of community service in the neighborhood. So we took our medicine, we got screamed at, made our apologies, left for a few days, came back, cooled it all out, finished painting the wall, and she walked up on us and she said, "You know, it's so crazy that you're painting these words, like these words in particular, because the first T of together," she said, "a woman early 80s, spun out on crack, burned the house down. She killed her 6 kids in the house. She's like, I know those kids are together. She's like, it's so wild. You could have painted anything on these walls. The fact that you painted that, she was like, it's too deep. And, you know, what do you say after that? You just finish the best you can and be thankful. So we did. And, you know, this is when you open up, I liken what we do in these cases to like just setting up our microphone, getting the levels right, and, you know, letting it play out on its own, and just not really trying to interfere with people speaking and the signal that they're generating. And this is like a perfect example of how it worked to its ultimate benefit. And this was the last one. After this, I was like, we have to stop. This is getting too deep. Well, what are we doing here? Oh, sorry. There we are. But it didn't stop. Spoiler. I got a call from Sister Gabriella. She's with an order of nuns called Talitha Kum. They specialize, their main purpose, their main focus is stopping human trafficking. She said, you need to represent us to people in faraway places. Okay, great. So what we did was we thought of what she was doing and what her order was doing, like spycraft. So we wanted to make like a James Bond type poster, and this is what I came up with. The extra phones, the fake visa, you know, bolt cutters just in case it gets to that point, safe houses, and, you know, action, and finally sensible shoes, because any nun will tell you that's the most important thing, sensible shoes. So we painted this, and we said, you know, we should make a print, and we made a print. We have a print shop in the basement of ESPO's Art World. I'll introduce you to that later. And then we went and met this guy, Papa Francisco and Papa S, together again. He's got a good handwriting. He told me not to tag the bathroom, and I did not. And that's Sister Gabriella. So it's a really short line. I mean, it's a long story, but it's a short line from the train tracks in Philadelphia and Vatican City. Which leads us, all roads lead back to this place. This is ESPO's Art World. The work of Papa Francisco is in here too. And we had the base on Livingston Street to paint the love letter to Brooklyn. And then we got used to having a place to work and a place to meet. And this grew out of that. And at first it was icy signs, and we wanted to be like a sign shop. But I also wanted to sell artwork, and it became too confusing to charge one price for art and one price for signs. So we spun off Icy Signs. Icy Signs is in Philadelphia, and ESPO's Art World is here in the motherland. And we're open every day that we owe rent, Monday to Monday, 12 to 6. People always say we're closed because they leave the house in the morning and they get home at night. That makes sense. But this is our base of operations, and we have a print shop in the basement, and we really try to be useful for people. If you were here, I'd be home now. This is probably all hand painted, of course. And we've been open now 10 years. It's kind of funny how time flies. Like, it's every day is an opportunity to try to figure out what the needs of the community are. It's a really interesting community. It's downtown Brooklyn, but we had a needle exchange on the block for years. There's a severe drug problem in the neighborhood. There's also a lot of development happening. There's a lot of schools, and there's a lot of activity of every imaginable kind. I mean, it's Brooklyn. And here's a group of kids all pointing at the "Everything is S" poster and screaming it. And we're there, we're trying to teach, we're trying to show like what we know. And it's an ongoing concern, as they say. I wanted to show this because this is limestone. You never get to paint limestone, but they gave me permission to paint limestone. And I gotta say, black spray paint on limestone is really phenomenal. And we had come so far in writing that this is in a neighborhood in Philadelphia called Rittenhouse Square. They have a very tight group of people that do not allow anything interesting to happen, ever. So there's a lot of pushback for this. They actually sued the city of Philadelphia to get this removed. And the city of Philadelphia, did their best to keep it in place. They fought a 5-year battle, and they agreed in arbitration to remove it. But the fact that it went that far and it took that long was really kind of amazing. And I found out that removing spray paint from limestone is really, really difficult. They spent a fortune to remove it. But in the center of this are a few signatures that, I can almost hit it with the cursor. John Wanamaker was a really excellent postmaster. Look at that hand, that script is so beautiful. Sun Ra, legendary, genius musician from Germantown, Philadelphia. Ben Franklin's signature is not that good, but he's got a lot of gusto, so good for him. Charles Santori was the second working artist I ever met. Children's book illustrator and really just a phenomenal artist. One thing that I'm comforted by, this wall got buffed, and I depicted on it the work of Frank Furness, this lovely, crazy building that's on the far left corner. Frank Furness built, 200 buildings in Philadelphia. All of them got torn down. There's maybe 5 left. Such a genius, beautiful architect, worked almost exclusively in brick. Phenomenal, the most phenomenal, beautiful buildings you can imagine in brick. And he was so thoroughly disrespected in his time and several times beyond his time. I take, as my graffiti gets buffed, I'm just I'm in good company. Me and Frank Furness, no problem. And for me, it's always been a temporary medium. I'm never really worried about it too much. Yeah, that's Rodin. Pretty good. During COVID last year, I painted these panels down on Spring Street. This was super fun to do. A bunch of them got stolen, and I repainted them. And we auctioned them off, and we made a nice donation to God's Love We Deliver. What a great place. God's Love We Deliver and Housing Works. Give them all you can. Sorry. This painted right after George Floyd, and this is the theater in Union Square. I forget her name, but the woman that owns the theater is named for her. Her husband's a major Republican donor. She's obviously on another page, and she's done a really great job. She's she's moved this mural to the side on 15th Street. All the names were painted by volunteers. I had volunteers come and pick a name, and they painted it. So there's a wide cross-section of New Yorkers that painted these names. It's great seeing the wild disparity in handwriting. But some woman walked by, and she was carrying her bags, and she says, "Did you do Sandra Bland yet?" And she painted Sandra Bland's name. It's really a distinctive, it's something I think about all the time. She dropped her bags, she wrote the name, she picked up her bags, and off she went. And this is still there. It's still giving strength, it's still telling a story, and glad to serve. And then I paint paintings, paintings. Oil enamel on aluminum. That's my process. Simple as that, easy. Yay, I got something done today. Yay. Running late. When I talk about like logotypes expressing emotion, this is what I'm talking about. This is it. That's me. Self-portrait. Portrait of the artist. I'm late. This is a 8-foot by 8-foot. It's acrylic on canvas. It took so long to paint. It takes so long to paint these. And acrylic's even slower than oil paints. It dries fast, but it takes so many coats. It's ridiculous. Self-portrait of the artist, back in the soup. You know, all these little logotypes, just expressing thoughts, and really just trying to, somewhere between an emoji and it's a logotype, it's a hieroglyph, it's a complicated world, and we're living in it. Be my half-rent hero, I'll be yours. Poor Charlie Brown. There he is. He's getting punched in the face repeatedly, but good grief. Today I'm juggling 3 balls, tomorrow I'll juggle 5 balls. Easy. I'm on my way home, work. You can check off the one that matters. Today is going, and words never fail. I fail words, always. I owe you everything. And the pillow saying, sorry I left you, come back to me. I am a story told walking, true story. Too many words. It's got to be simple like that. Time dragging. It says it all. Poor guy. It's almost 5 p.m. somewhere. I was born far away from home. Oh, there he is again. Didn't we just talk to you? This all ended up at the Brooklyn Museum in the Rotunda. I got one of those great machines that you put a quarter in, you can zoom in and take a look around. I think we made $600 of that device. So it's hard to make money in a nonprofit institution, but it can be done. And just on demand, by demand of the director, Ann Pasternak, the lovely Ann Pasternak, she wanted me to paint in the gallery every day. So I did for 9 months. People swear I didn't do it, but I have proof. And at the end of the 9 months, this is what I ended up with. This is almost 9 months of work, 16 feet by 16 feet. It's for sale. Make me an offer. Paintings, New York Ballet. Very nice. Sarah Jessica Parker was at the opening. She looked beautiful. This is a rolling shopping cart that I'm hoping to sell paintings out of in a town corner near you. Keep an eye out. And this is another. This is it. This is me, giving myself a pound. All I do is fight with myself. I don't know if that's your problem, but that's my problem. Time, we are all we have. How much time we got left? We're about that time? All right, well, da-da-da-da-da. Oh, I wanted to show you this. I just painted this last week. So after all the ways and means, the back and forth, I'm back where I started. This is called Autobiography in One Can. And yeah. I want to show you one more thing. And speaking about, signatures. So I should have pulled my pants up, so we want to. Just to give you the idea of the gesture. And this video is 40 seconds long. That's far too long. See the cops, I'm already on my way to jail. It's just ridiculous. Terrible. Stop that person. And that's it. That's what we came down to.